We bet you've got plenty of Washingtons, Lincolns, Hamiltons, and maybe a few Benjamins in your wallet. But how many of you are also plunking down Wilsons, Chases, Madisons, and McKinleys?
Believe it or not, you can still spend this, cash it in, and everything like that. It's worth more than the face value, so I wouldn't suggest doing it.
That's right, a $1,000 bill. Bet you didn't see that coming. Grover Cleveland isn't exactly the most famous American president ever, but he was pretty important for his time. Plus, he has the distinction of being both the 22nd and 24th president, as well as the first Democratic head of the country elected after the Civil War. His party urged him to run for a third term in both 1896 and 1904, but he ultimately declined and instead worked as a trustee at Princeton University. Cleveland died of a heart attack on June 24, 1908, and then just 6 years later he ended up on the $20 bill. Then in 1928 he got an upgrade of sorts when he was placed on the $1,000 bill. If you don't have any Clevelands in your wallet, that's because the $1,000 bill has been out of print since 1945, and the Department of the Treasury hasn't issued it since 1969. It might seem as mythical as Montgomery Burns' $1 trillion bill, but the $100,000 note actually existed back in the day.
Ooh, $1 trillion bill? That's a spicy meatball.
The Treasury printed the $100,000 gold certificate for just a few weeks from December 1934 to January 1935, and it featured the face of Woodrow Wilson. But these notes were never actually circulated among the general public. Instead, they were only used by Federal Reserve banks, which circulated them between each other during official transactions. As you might have suspected, the $100,000 gold certificate is the largest denomination of currency the Treasury has ever released. Wilson served as president from 1913 to 1921, guiding America through the First World War, establishing the Federal Reserve, and helping to create the League of Nations. He also oversaw the introduction of prohibition and the beginning of women's suffrage. He died in 1924, and this is the only denomination he's ever appeared on. Benjamin Franklin is one of only 2 non-presidents currently on American currency, but being all about the Benjamins wasn't always as valuable as it is now. In 1874, Franklin first appeared on the $50 bill, and then he was later on the 10. Since 1914, he's been on the 100, which is currently the largest of the 7 U.S. currency denominations in active circulation. From 1914 to 1928, the Federal Reserve used a side profile of Franklin for the bill, but beginning in 1929, that changed to a more traditional front portrait. Then, in 1996, the Reserve began using its current image of Franklin. Until 1928, the back of the $100 bill featured a vignette consisting of several figures depicting the principles of labor, plenty, America, peace, and commerce, which changed to a picture of Independence Hall in 1929. Despite never serving as president, Franklin was instrumental in the founding of the United States. His many accomplishments include being the country's first postmaster general, helping draft the Declaration of Independence, and serving for much of the Revolutionary War as the American minister to France. Though you don't see them very often, the $2 bill actually has a pretty interesting backstory. They were among the first greenbacks the Treasury printed in 1862 during the Civil War, and they featured Thomas Jefferson's face since 1869. But they've also long been regarded as evil or associated with nefarious activities.
People were a little superstitious about spending them.
The government started issuing the $2 bill to soldiers as part of their pay during the Second World War, partly as a way to get rid of some huge stockpiles. From 1966 to 1976, the Treasury stopped printing them, and it currently only prints them periodically. It's easy to see why Jefferson was selected for this bill, as he's one of the most respected founding fathers in American history. He wrote the Declaration of Independence, served as both Virginia governor and the U.S. minister to France, and became the 3rd American president in 1801. He died in 1826, and nowadays you can see him as one of the 4 faces on Mount Rushmore. As the first Secretary of the Treasury, it makes perfect sense that Alexander Hamilton's face has been all over American currency. On the original series of demand notes issued in 1861, he was on the $5 bill, and then he was on the $2 legal tender notes the following year. In 1878, he was on the $20 notes, and then in 1882, he appeared on the $1,000 gold certificates that used orange backs and could be redeemed for gold coins. From 1918 to 1928, Hamilton's portrait adorned the $1,000 bill, but then in 1929, he was switched onto the new $10 bill, where he's remained ever since. Even though he was never a president, Hamilton still had an outsized impact on the founding of America, which you might have heard about if you attended a Broadway show in the last decade or so. Hamilton died in 1804 after being shot in a duel by Aaron Burr. 7th American President Andrew Jackson has appeared on U.S. currency dating back to the $5 bill in 1869. From 1914 to 1928, he was on the 10, and then in 1929, he doubled up to the $20 bill, where he still resides today. But that's scheduled to change in 2030, as he's set to be replaced by abolitionist Harriet Tubman. Jackson's at least allegedly going to be removed from the front. More on this in a sec. During Jackson's time on the 20, the bill was going through a series of various revisions. In 1998, it began to feature a close-up version of Jackson, which it still uses today.
When you talk about African Americans and what they've contributed to this country, I can't think of a better person than Harriet Tubman.
In 2016, the Obama administration decided to replace Andrew Jackson's image on the $20 bill with Harriet Tubman. Jackson will still appear on the back, though, while Tubman's image will be front and center. That will make her the first person of color and the first woman on the front of a current piece of American currency. However, she won't be the first woman ever, as Martha Washington appeared on $1 silver certificates issued in 1886 and 1891. The Trump administration briefly halted progress on the new $20 bill, but it began again under the Biden administration.
Earn me some serious Tubmans. That's right.
Well, not so fast, Barack. The Tubman 20 has been delayed again and again, and again. Allegedly, the Tubman 20 will be in circulation in 2030, but we'll see. In the meantime, in 2024, she appeared on a series of coins, a $5, a $1, and a $half, all legal tender. Tubman was chosen due to her extensive anti-slavery efforts, which included being a conductor on the Underground Railroad and serving as a Union spy and nurse during the Civil War. As of 2016, there were also plans to include several other groundbreaking women and people of color on currency in the future, including Susan B. Anthony, Sojourner Truth, and Martin Luther King Jr. Appearing on the $50 bill since 1914, Ulysses S. Grant is one of the few former presidents who is more famous for what he did before his time in the Oval Office. He first joined the Union Army in 1843 and served during the Mexican-American War. He left the Army in 1854, but then returned in 1861 just as the Civil War was breaking out, and he eventually became the commander of all Union armies in 1864. Grant was elected to 2 terms as president in 1868 and 1872, but unfortunately his cabinet was beset by corruption and various scandals. He died in 1885 at the age of 63. The Treasury put Grant on the $50 bill in 1914, and he remains there to this day. In 2010, Republican Representative Patrick McHenry floated the idea of removing Grant from the $50 bill in favor of Ronald Reagan, but that ultimately didn't amount to anything. John Marshall and William McKinley don't have a lot in common, besides both appearing on the $500 bill. Marshall, born in 1755, was a veteran of the Revolutionary War who briefly served as Secretary of State, before becoming the 4th Chief Justice on the Supreme Court from 1801 to 1835. McKinley, meanwhile, was born nearly a century later in 1843. He served in the Civil War and was elected president in 1896 and 1900, but soon after his re-election, he was assassinated by anarchist Leon Czolgosz. McKinley first appeared on currency in 1902 on the $10 national banknotes. As for Marshall, from 1918 to 1927, his portrait graced the $500 bill. And then from 1928 to 1969, he was replaced with McKinley. The Treasury hasn't issued the $500 bill since 1969, and it's been out of print since 1945. A $5,000 bill might have sounded unfathomable a few minutes ago, but now that you've heard about the $100,000 gold certificates, we bet you think anything is possible. The Treasury first introduced the $5,000 in 1878, and it featured the face of former President James Madison. Then in 1918, the Federal Reserve issued its first $5,000 notes with Madison still on them, but they've been out of print since 1945. While Thomas Jefferson is considered the father of the Declaration of Independence, Madison is the father of the Constitution. He helped draft the Bill of Rights and was a member of the first U.S. Congress. After serving as Secretary of State for 2 terms under Jefferson, he served 2 terms as president from 1809 to 1817. He died in 1836 from natural causes. Did the United States really need a bill that was worth 5 figures in the 19th century? Whether or not it was necessary, it definitely happened. In 1878, the Treasury issued the first $10,000 legal tender notes with President Andrew Jackson on them. Then, from 1918 to 1969, they featured the mug of Salmon P. Chase, the 6th Supreme Court Chief Justice. Like other higher denomination currencies, the 10,000 has been out of print since 1945 and out of circulation since 1969. Chase also played a key role in Abraham Lincoln's cabinet during the Civil War. During his time as Chief Justice from 1864 to 1873, he presided over several landmark cases, including the impeachment of Andrew Johnson. He first appeared on lower denomination currency, gracing the $1 legal tender notes of 1862 and the $10 bill in 1863 and 1864. The $10,000 bill is the highest denomination of American currency ever circulated among the general public. As the first American president, it only makes perfect sense that George Washington is on the $1 bill. Born in 1732 in what was then the colony of Virginia, he fought for the British in the French and Indian War, but just a decade later he was fighting against the Redcoats as the commander-in-chief of the Revolutionary Forces in the Continental Army. In 1789, the Founding Fathers unanimously elected Washington as president. He didn't even need to campaign because he was so highly regarded, and then he won a second term in 1792, also unanimously. Washington's face is now synonymous with the $1 bill, having appeared on it since 1869. It's one of the least frequently counterfeited notes, which we suspect has something to do with its low value.
I'd buy that for $1.
Abraham Lincoln entered politics in 1846 as a U.S. representative from Illinois, but he failed to win election as a senator in 1856. However, things were looking up for Honest Abe when he was elected president just 4 years later. Presiding over the country during one of its most tumultuous eras, Lincoln was able to save the Union from complete collapse and help vanquish the Confederacy. His administration also presided over the original induction of the Greenbacks in 1861. There were extremely high expectations for a second term, but then he was assassinated by John Wilkes Booth on April 14, 1865, just days after the war ended. Nowadays, Lincoln is pretty much synonymous with the end of slavery, and he's one of the most celebrated figures in American history. Lincoln's first appearance on U.S. currency was on the original $10 demand notes of 1861. Then, in 1869, he appeared on the $100 bill, and beginning in 1914, he finally showed up on the 5. Since then, the bill has undergone major revisions in 1929, 1993, 2000, and 2008. The back of the 1914 series $5 bill featured vignettes of Christopher Columbus and the Pilgrims, but since 1929, that design has been replaced by the Lincoln Memorial.
Party on, dudes!